This video is for Senator Mike Lee and the Senate Judiciary Committee. My name is Chad Marks. At the age of 24 in February 2003, I was arrested and charged in a one-count indictment for my involvement in a nonviolent crack cocaine conspiracy. The government offered a plea agreement to me that could have resulted in as low as 10 years if I would simply admit my guilt, tell on others, and go off to prison. I didn't accept the government's offer, and what happened next was shocking. The government decided to supersede my indictment. They included two 18 U.S.C. 924C charges, and with it, a new mandatory minimum of 40 years. My mandatory minimum went from 10 to 40. Long story short, I proceeded to trial, was convicted, and the federal sentencing judge imposed that 40-year term. I went to prison and always believed that I may never get out, and if I did get out, I'd be in my 60s. But then came the First Step Act. The First Step Act took the 18 U.S.C. 924C stacking charges and clarified what Congress had always meant, that people like me should not have two 924C counts that come with 5 and 25-year sentences in the same indictment. But the problem was, those changes were not made retroactive, thus leaving me in prison. But there was continued hope because the First Step Act changed the compassionate release statute. When they changed the compassionate release statute, it allowed federal judges to take second looks, in essence. If the judge found that there were extraordinary and compelling reasons to reduce a sentence, then the judge had the power to do so. However, the government doesn't agree with that. So on June 25th, I was released from prison for my 40-year sentence, after my judge found that there were extraordinary and compelling reasons in my case to reduce that sentence. He relied on the changes in the First Step Act to 924C and my rehabilitation while in prison. I had completed over 100 rehabilitative programs. I taught GED classes. I also facilitated Alternative Violence Project seminars, taught Leaders Breed Leaders, where we taught men to be real men, real fathers, and real leaders. The judge took all of that into consideration, and by the grace of God, I was released from prison. But now is the dilemma. At the end of October, the government will be arguing against me to try to put me back in prison, arguing that the judge did not have the authority to reduce my sentence, that only the BOP did. But this isn't just about me. This is about all the other men and women that are suffering in prison under a statute that Congress has said is wrong, is grotesque, is draconian. People like Maurice Navarro Brooks or Mau Mau, Keepa Mau Mau, Mackenzie Spite, Ian Owens. These people have been sentenced to hundreds of years under 924C stacking, a law that Senator Mike Lee knows all too well is wrong. That's because Weldon Angelos from Utah was sentenced under this same stacking, and he found relief because Senator Mike Lee went to bat for him. We're living in a country where we see all kinds of things going on, and race relations are absolutely horrible. And some people might want to say or use the word systemic racism. Well, I'll tell you about 924C. If we're talking about systemic racism, we should be talking about some of the facts. And some of those facts are this. The Sentencing Commission's 15-year report in 2004 stated that black defendants accounted for 48% of offenders who qualified for a charge under 924C, but they represented 56% of those actually charged under the same statute and 64% of those convicted under it. That fact right there should tell us that 18 U.S.C. 924C changes should be retroactive. How can we say that a law is wrong, change it, but only say it applies to the people that get arrested now? How does it not apply to the people that have been suffering under these laws for years? People that have been sentenced to hundreds and hundreds of years. Sean Hopwood, former federal prisoner, law professor, and lawyer at Georgetown. He also was charged with a 924C at one point in his life. But he got out of prison and changed his life. He became a productive citizen, a lawyer. We see change all around us. We see people that are an example to why other people deserve a second chance to reclaim their lives. People like Alice Marie Johnson, who President Trump just pardoned. There are plenty of people that deserve a second chance that might never get one. If the Senate, if Congress, does not step in and make the First Step Act sentencing changes retroactive. We're a nation that should learn from our mistakes. In 2010, we changed the crack law. Disproportionately destroyed African Americans. We changed it. But it wasn't until 2018 that it was made retroactive. Should we still be doing the same thing but 924C? With 851? 21 U.S.C. 851 sends nonviolent drug offenders to prison for life. And Congress changed that law. But yet didn't make it retroactive. If something's wrong, then it's always wrong. And I'm making this video to ask you for a second step, to change things, to make it retroactive for all people that deserve a second chance to reclaim their lives. Your change didn't say that people could just get out of prison, but your change said that, hey, they have to go before the federal sentencing judge, the person in the best possible position to determine whether a person should get a second chance. And that's what I'm asking Congress to do. I mean, we can just look at the facts. Black offenders were convicted of a firearm offense carrying a mandatory minimum more often than any other racial group. In fiscal year 2016, black offenders accounted for 52.6% of offenders convicted under Section 924C, followed by Hispanic offenders 29.5%, white offenders 15.7%, and other race offenders 2.2%. The impact on black offenders is even more pronounced for offenders convicted either of multiple counts under Section 924C or offenses carrying a mandatory minimum penalty under the Armed Career Criminal Act. Black offenders accounted for more than two-thirds of such offenders, 70.5% and 70.4% respectively. Black offenders also generally receive longer average sentences for firearm offenses carrying a mandatory minimum penalty than any other racial group. In the fiscal year 2016, black offenders convicted under Section 924C received an average sentence of 165 months, compared to 140 months for white offenders and 130 months for Hispanic offenders. Only other race offenders received longer average sentences, 170 months, but they accounted for only 2.2% of the Section 924C offenders. Tomorrow's a big day. It's a big day for a young man named Keepa Mau Mau. His sentencing judge, under the First Step Act and the Compassionate Release Statute, found that his young age, his rehabilitation, and the changes to 18 U.S.C. 924C were extraordinary and compelling reasons. What his judge did was reduced his sentence, reduced it to time served where he would walk out of prison, but he would not find his freedom. Keepa would remain in prison because the government appealed that decision. Tomorrow, the government will be arguing against releasing Keepa Mau Mau. The government will be arguing against the judge's decision. Keepa Mau Mau was sentenced to hundreds of years under stacked 924C offenses when he was 20 years old. Does he deserve a second chance to reclaim his life? Senator Mike Lee, he's from Utah. But it's not just about Keepa Mau Mau either. It's about all the men and women who deserve a second chance that were sentenced under a law that Congress said was draconian, was grotesque. And that's why I'm asking Congress to step up and change what is obviously wrong. There's many men and women that deserve that second chance. And with that second chance, I'm asking that a second step be really considered. And part of that second step, I'm asking that the 924C changes be retroactive.